Welcome to the Getting High on Leadership series featuring Paul Karasik. Paul is one of America's top management consultants helping leaders succeed. He is the author of 9 books, including Sweet Persuasion and Brilliant Thoughts and Provocative Questions. His insights appear regularly in major publications, and he is one of the most sought-after executive coaches. Paul founded the American Seminar Leaders Association and the Psychedelic Institute of Los Angeles. He is a popular speaker at national conferences and has been on stages across all 50 states and internationally. Paul's work addresses the question, how can we transform conflict in business into collaboration? With decades of experience in management, leadership, and psychedelics, he brings a unique perspective on personal and societal growth. In this series, we'll be discussing his latest book, Getting High on Leadership, The Leader's Guide to Higher Consciousness. We'll be exploring the concepts, techniques, and mindset required to revolutionize leadership.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sanchez, your host, and we are joined once again by Paul Karasik, author of Getting High on Leadership. We're making our way through the book section by section, and as always, you can grab an ebook for yourself from the link below. And today we are talking about the section called Deep Listening, which can be found on page 90 of the book. And Paul, we've talked a lot about communication now, and in how important it is for a leader to communicate, not just through their words, but through their actions and their tone of their voice and everything else. But then now we need to look at the other side of communication, listening. And I think this section opens us up to talk about it just perfectly, man. Where can we begin?
To really be effective, you have to be listening about 80% of the time and speaking 20% of the time. To be really effective, to be persuasive, to influence, to guide people on the path that you're leading them as a leader. Listening is the key. Listening is the secret to success. And it's not so easy, right? Listening is a very difficult, there's a lot, like we said about speaking, there's a lot of things that make it difficult to choose the right words, inflections, voice, everything else. Well, the same with listening. The problem is we've never understood listening from the highest vantage point, which I want to bring out today. And that's being conscious, observing, watching. Watching what? Watching how we get in the way of the communication. For example, you're speaking to me, and now is the time I should be listening, right? But what do I do a lot of times while you're speaking?
Yeah, that's where it's common for people to start thinking about what they want to say next, right? Or who knows what you're thinking about? Maybe something you need to do later today.
Yeah, you're not even listening at all. The average person. That not only aren't they deep listening, which this chapter is about, but they're not listening at all. They're thinking and planning and reacting, and it has nothing to do with listening. What would deep listening be? Well, deep listening would be the allowing for an emptiness in your own mind, in your own consciousness, to not prejudge in any way, to not have any thoughts there at all, but to really be receptive, to not be reactive, but to watch from that level of higher and listen from that level of higher consciousness. Now you're really listening. When you do that, what do you hear? Well, what you hear is the whole essence of what they're saying. The feelings.
You read between the lines there.
You read between the lines. You're listening to the subtleties of what they're saying. You're hearing the inflections. I remember I went on a sales call and with my mentor. And I was very young, and he was my mentor, my coach. And we did a presentation for a group. And I walked away, and I said, how did I do? And he said, you did pretty good. But did you see, and he started listing things, did you see when you said the word such and such, how that woman tilted her head? I said, no. I said, did you see when you were speaking to that person, everybody got really excited and on board? I said, no, I was kind of involved with my own thinking about what I want to say and stuff like that. And he was listening visually, verbally, and vocally to the present. And that's deep listening. When you're listening visually, vocally, and verbally, not just to the words, because the words, like we talked about, don't mean anything in this scenario. I mean, very little.
Right. They're conveying just that information, not the heart or the emotion or, as you mentioned a few times here, that, right, with leadership being that transference of emotion.
Yeah, but
it needs to be transferred still while you're listening. It doesn't stop just because you've stopped talking.
Well, let's look at the difference. He was saying you have to listen better when you give a talk. You think you're talking, but you need to be listening. That's the way to get the most out of that presentation. And I got it. I really understood that. It's not just I'm going to speak. Blah, 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 blah. No, but when I'm listening to the audience, when I'm responding to the audience, when I'm really listening to them visually, vocally, and verbally, then the words change that I'm going to say. And the effectiveness is increased exponentially because they're involved in. And so deep listening goes down to getting out of the way. That's really what we're talking about here. Getting out of the way to hear the truth of the situation. And that getting out of the way is called higher consciousness. Listening from that space where there's no judgment, where it is what it is, you will hear the truth. As soon as you get active mentally, you can't do it because there's no space. All the space for listening has been taken up by your own thoughts and your own anxieties, and you're responding to everything. Right. And that's why I think, you always like technique, Robin. I would say we said it before, stepping back before you respond, really listening, taking in and that pausing. Pause. Yeah. and really get the whole thing. Because when you're listening, you're watching on a couple different levels. You're listening on a couple different levels. That needs somewhat of an evaluation before you respond. And that pause is not manipulative. I'm not saying do that as a manipulative thing in communication. I'm saying
it's more out of pure efficiency, just so that you don't have those trigger responses, without actually thinking or considering the situation.
Did you really hear what they said? That's my question. Yeah. And usually you don't. You respond from a whole different thing. Somebody could say, hey, I really like working here, but it's time for me to move on. I've got another opportunity. And the person says, what did we do wrong? How could we make... No, he just said he really liked working here.
Yeah, right.
But you didn't listen to what he said. You really didn't listen. And it's amazing, walk down a hall, hey, good morning. How you doing? I mean, what does it mean? Nobody listened to it. Nobody cared.
The common response is just like, fine.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Everything's fine. Yeah.
All right. You don't really look up from your coffee or your phone.
No, it's a terrible state. But getting back to the idea of deep listening is finding that silence. In this chapter, I refer to that. In the silence, you can listen deeply. Listen to the tone, then listen deeper. With your agenda aside, you can hear the underlying truth of the situation. And all progress begins with truth. So before you can take maybe where there's an emotional content, you really have to get a picture and you have to be able to listen. The best salespeople and the best leaders are great listeners. They are always. And I think that's where managers, we talked about managers versus leaders. A lot of them aren't.
There's a lot more to think about. There's a lot of wheels spinning around the logistics and the admin side of their managerial
Constantly,
role.
Yeah. And they bring that into the conversation and never pull back to the big picture and to communicate on the mission, vision, values, listening, that they're always in the grinding app, data, measuring, and so on and so forth.
So kind of pausing, asking questions, making sure to give your full attention while listening. Try as you can to stop those wheels from spinning, or at least pay less attention to them, and pay attention to the one actually speaking to you.
Yeah.
And then another part of that, which I'm doing right now, is paraphrasing. So you can also in the Agile and Scrum world, deep listening and active listening is so important, and that's why sometimes you get really quiet teams, and you just have to embrace the silence and just let that team be quiet for a minute, because it's surprising what can come out of that you could never have drawn out with words.
Yeah, you have to get that's right. You have to get comfortable with the silence. And you're mentioning something that's really critical in this process that I've taught for many, many years and still do in our leadership program, which is active listening. And active listening is the highest form of listening. So for the sake of this program, I think it's important to mention it because it is the highest form of listening. All conscious leaders should use some form of it until it becomes natural. So what is active listening? Asking a question, getting a response, paraphrasing the response, and feeding it back to the person and getting confirmation that that's what they said. And you see this a lot, active listening in couples therapy. Anytime where communication is critical for the outcome, active listening is a part of it. Sometimes it's really hard to do deep listening. And then I might say, did I hear you correctly?
Right.
And you would say
that definitely helps the communication just stick. And then I think that active type of listening is maybe slightly different than the deep listening. But I do think the deep listening that you're explaining here, it involves being active. You can't listen deeply unless you're already listening actively.
That's right. That's right. So one is more of a technique and one is more of a way to be. And
that's a good way to look at it.
The essence of this whole program is about the way to be. And like I said, I didn't want to go heavy on technique, but to not mention active listening would do disservice to this chapter, because it's kind
maybe
of
a
like
stepping stone.
It's the stepping stone. That's right. It's like, got to start with this. Just confirm that the very words. Now, when you're using active listening at the highest level, you're also feeding back feelings. Now you feel heard.
Yeah, that's the result. That's the outcome of deep listening, right? For your team and for whomever you're listening to.
Which is the final point for this chapter, which is when you listen, you give the greatest gift you can give to another person. And that's respect and dignity. And when you think about what you have to give, like what value you have as a leader, what value you have as a team member, what value you have in society to other people, to serve other people, there is no greater gift that we can give people than dignity and respect. And when we listen, we give them that. And deep listening takes it to another level, because we're not on our agenda. We've abandoned all that. And for the moment, just are the watcher, just are the listener, just seeing it for what it is, what they're saying, how they're feeling, taking it in. When they know you've done that, you've created a bond as a leader that goes beyond any technique. There's no technique involved.
Well summarized there, Paul. Yeah, thank you for the wisdom and insight on this section. And thank you to our listeners and viewers. As always, you can continue to follow us along throughout the series. You can feel free to start from the beginning or join us on the next one. You can grab the ebook from the link below and consider the listening side of the equation as you communicate in your roles this week, before the next episode. That's a wonderful takeaway, Paul. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Getting High on Leadership series. If you have any questions, you can comment below or send them in via email to paul@paulkarasik.com. Follow him on Instagram at PK_theconversation. Find out more at wholesalerinstitute.com and psychedelic-awakening.com. The Getting High on Leadership series is produced by Rob Sanchez and Apartment 113, which can be found at apartment113.com and followed on Instagram at APT_113.